I'm looking at gallery view here. Like, who was at our 2017 gathering? Can you like wave wildly? Yeah. Oh, it's nice to see some folks here. Yes. I kind of say that was sort of the starting point of this general where we are now, but this conversation has been going on for decades. With our pioneers. And I see some pioneers here. Who's been playing taiko for 20, 30, 40 years? Wave your hands wildly. Yes. I see Chris Kubo, Michelle. I see Linda. Yep, Kelly. This conversation looking at gender identity, gender equity in the arts, in an art form that shows itself up as being primarily sort of dominated by sort of masculine bodies, has been something that has been, in conversation for a while. But it was really Tiffany Tamari-Bucci, who is not here, I think, today, who submitted a proposal to NATC in 2017 to run a mini intensive that didn't get selected, but was encouraged by Mark Rooney actually to consider submitting a proposal to run a Taiko intensive, Summer Taiko Institute, I can never remember, and brought me in. And Tiffany has always been someone so passionate about seeing more women in the art form. I've been always passionate about creating spaces for conversation and for ways for us to bring our full selves to the table. And so the two of us with Sarah Ayako and Sasha Molina organized the first STI, terrible acronym. And it was very clear, one of the first questions that we asked ourselves was, who is this for? And we didn't want to limit it because this was a conversation to be had by the entire community. And so we really framed it around open to everyone, but we were going to have a conversation about looking at sort of what roles did women play in the community. And as I said earlier, intentionally diverse in terms of age. We had a lot of questions, a lot of breakout groups, people just really sharing their stories. And as someone said earlier, one of the big things that we took away was this idea of do 5 things that scare you. And it was really clear that it wasn't that we didn't have this kind of push to move ourselves forward because of misogyny, because of sexism. We didn't put ourselves forward in many ways. And so many of us decided this needed to be a conversation that continued. And so we, the next year, really wanted to continue conversations wherever we were. And it was at that year that I think Michelle Fuji was a panelist in the first year in STI, but then we met again at the regional Taiko gathering in the Northwest or Southwest. Anyway, depending on how you think about where you are in relation. And Linda Hoffman, myself, Sarah got together and we started brainstorming what would it look like to actually create more of a container or a forum to develop leaders, basically, and artists. And so the idea for the fellowship, Women and Taiko Fellowship, came about, and so did Step Up, Step Out. And it was really managed. I have to be really clear that there was just like 4 core people, myself, Sarah, Pat, Deborah Wong, were kind of the core that were trying to generate enough energy to keep things going. And that's the way we ran for a couple of years. And it's always been this scrappy group of dedicated volunteers that tried their best to like get things organized and going. And I feel like we've been incredibly instrumental in getting some things off the ground. And we've always had room for conversations about, I think, what does this mean? What does this work mean? What are we actually trying to do? What do we mean, women in Taiko? What does it mean to think about gender equity and gender inclusion? I think I'll pause there. That's the short version.
There's been lots of, I think some of the milestone activities that Karen identified, the Summer Taiko Institute in 2017, alongside with 2019 Step Up, Step Out, were really kind of nice milestones. But also, throughout all this time, there's been some really incredible projects, incredible opportunities of connection, and you've kind of heard that woven within today through the pictures, through the stories. So we celebrate all of the above. We also, as Karen said, it has been completely volunteer run, and there's been different groupings of people who have been putting this together. We also are a volunteer active Taiko folk that are coming together as the Mobilization Committee. So to really center on that experience, as Karen mentioned, I started to get really involved in 2019 when North American Taiko Conference was going to be hosted here in where I reside right now in Portland, Oregon, also the ancestral land of Clackamas Cowlitz and many other indigenous communities along the Columbia River. And um, as this happened, kind of modeling from 2017, that people were already going to be Taiko folk were going to be coming here. And so, could we extend that experience into a Women and Taiko event? And I was like, yes, let's do it. Step Up, Step Out happened, as well as the extended opportunity to do a more longer leadership journey, which Eileen spoke about in her story with doing a fellowship. Post 2019, we had this wonderful energy. It was just, when you get into those experiences of spending 3 days together, being in conversation, and then you say goodbye. There was so much energy coming out from there. The question as organizers was, can we continue this work? And how could we do that? We decided, Karen and I was like, what, I came to Karen, I was like, why don't we just ask? Let's call it a mobilization committee, put the word out, ask if people would like to come together. And that's basically what originally created the people that you see in the space, the 8 of us. Um, we came together, of course, in recognition that there was a history before us of an identity, but then also for us being active, what is it that we're going to do? And that's really the premise of how we started. We originally were going to be meeting maybe once every 3 months. It wasn't going to be these very intense um, frequencies, because we recognized that everyone was active Taiko players. What ended up happening is 2020. I think we all have been living through that. And we thought, with everything that's happened, we want to meet more often. And that's what we did. We also realized that we wanted to mobilize, we wanted to be in response. And so we also, you'll hear from Vicky some of the things that we actually did do in 2020. We basically were inventing, we were building it as we were also doing things. It was an incredible period of time, a very bonding period of time, and I'm super grateful for the things that we were able to do. But throughout that as well, we also realized that there's some embedded histories that we also wanted to acknowledge, which we're in work of doing. I would call us still a work in progress, which is what I'll come to after you hear just even more about this. Is we know that we would love help, and that was partly why we decided to do an orientation. I'll come into that request later on. I'll pass it to Vicky, and just to let you know some context, we also realized as we were um, scrambling and also mobilizing and gathering together, we wanted to also provide some opportunity for leadership. And so for 2021, Vicky and I are co-chairs of this committee. with the opportunity and expectation as well that we are going to shift co-chairs, and there'll be new Vicky will be next year's co-chair alongside with another partner. So to my co-chair, Vicky, do you want to talk about 2020?
Yes, thank you to Karen and Michelle for giving this framing and context for what we are. Yeah, the first event that we really excitedly kicked off together as a committee was around Heartbeat back in February last year. So we had, I think Maman organized a Stay Connected call for the Women and Taiko community before that. And we also held a post-concert community conversation, which was held with many of the artists who were in the show. And that was a really meaningful space that we had the joy of creating. And from there, March happened, which led to many responsive things. We co-hosted a Taiko and COVID-19 webinar. There were also 2 webinars called Leading Our Community in Uncertain Times for Taiko leaders to come together and just be able to share in the difficulties of working through everything that was happening last year. Many of us were also facilitators of the Reimagining a New World, the Reimagine Taiko project in June last year. And throughout the year has been, as Michelle, a constant conversation about like, who are we? What are we doing? What does Women in Taiko mean and encompass in this whole discussion of gender inequity and anti-racism and all of these oppressions. And so, yeah, I think we've put a lot of work into what we're about to share next, and we're very excited to do that. So, passing on.
And I'm actually going to improvise a little bit. We're gonna, I'd like, wow, I hear the Taiko words. There must be a Taiko practice happening in your house. So I actually wanted to share with you the goals and values that the Mobilization Committee has actually composed. And this was over a 6-month process of discussion. And so we're going to collectively read this out loud. I'm going to also share it on the screen. And as we do this, we'll also afterwards tell you just a little bit of our stories of how we came about. So I invite our first reader to begin.
So the Women in Taiko Mobilization Committee Goals and Values. We recognize that this is a living document that reflects the shifting, flowing nature of this movement.
We connect with each other at the speed of trust and build relationships that provide space for vulnerability, accountability, and support.
We amplify and interconnect ongoing Women and Taiko ideas and projects.
We incorporate healing, nurturing, and balancing in all our practices.
We continuously develop shared understanding of values and goals through centering and inward reflection, as well as expansion and outward connection.
We acknowledge the historical roots of Taiko in social justice and are informed, inspired, and motivated to continue in this work.
We facilitate and create spaces of community by integrating lenses of anti-oppression to acknowledge complex intersectionalities and gender inequities.
With this as our foundation, we can be agile and mobilize together in this movement.
So with this, we just wanted to give some context and history of how we created this document. Actually, I'm going to invite Maman and Marit, and then to share the stories right now.
Yes. Yeah, so the last couple of weeks, the 4 of us spent a lot of times wordsmithing. That's a hard word to pronounce. We do a lot of wordsmith together And it's a really complex and thoughtful process, because I remember even just 1 or 2 words, we would be spending 10 minutes to look at multiple angle. What could that mean? What could that trigger? Is there any other possibility? And I really appreciate that we get to spend that time to do that together. And I think that's the part that I want to illuminate. I'm going to pass it to Marit.
I don't have a lot more to add, more just to add to what Maman said, that although the 4 of us, Vicky, Michelle, Maman, and I have been working on wordsmithing this quite intensively for the last couple of weeks, this is really the culmination of conversations that we've had over the past year. And so this is, again, this is something that is a living document. We anticipate it changing as new people come in and bring their stories and bring their voices to the group. Again, just want to emphasize that although this is a culmination of what our current MOCO has come up with, it's something that we foresee evolving with time and with our new voices.
And we also just want to illuminate, it's something that hopefully you all received a link for, which includes our goals and values, but also our membership criteria and expectations, alongside with our community agreements. Before we also spend just a second to talk about this, one of the reasons why we're bringing this forward is because we are really, really hoping to invite new members into our mobilization committee. As mentioned, it is volunteer run, and we recognize that there's so many different complex conversations that we've had, and we've had to calibrate ourselves with how much personal resources we can provide and also continue to move forward, as we are excited that we can share these documents, but we also recognize that there's some incompleteness with some of our work too. And in some ways, there's lots of work. There's always lots of work that can be done, as well as to be able to do the projects that we're dreaming. We have probably more ideas brewing than we can actually physically make come to fruition. So with that, Mama, can you talk just a little bit about the fuller part of the document? And then we want to give space for some questions, as well as a little bit more context and framing.
Yes. So I'm going to share the PDF on screen, because I would love to utilize that. And some of you already received this as well when you sign up for our meeting today. And the first part that we highlight was like, who are we welcoming into our space? And one part that I want to illuminate is, like, I remember in one of the conversations, we always talk about how what are Taiko people? When we talk about Taiko people, who is that referring to? And in our community, so many of us play so many different roles, and we thought we would actually put in some language words to highlight. Actually, there are many of us. Sometimes we always think about performers, or teachers, but actually there's so many other people come together that contribute to Taiko community. For example, parents, builders, producers, vendors, or technical staff, and many more. So we want to make sure that we take that into consideration, and we welcome all Taiko affiliated people to come in to be in movement with us. And then I also want to highlight that we list out in bullet points our membership expectations. There were some conversation about this as well, and I want to highlight the reason why we write down access to internet connection, even though knowing that by registering, you need access to internet connection. By receiving this, you have internet connection. But we also want to highlight that that's not a given, that's a privilege. And for us to be mobilization together, we do require that, but we also want to acknowledge that not everyone always have these access. So for now, we are utilizing internet connection, speakers, microphone, webcam to be meeting with each other. We also use these platforms, Zoom and Google. We did not list in here as we use Slack, but we also want to be aware that that could be something that we can negotiate and also be in agreement together when we are mobilizing together. So that's basically some highlights of the expectations, like what would you expect when you come in to join us for mobilization. And I think I can pass this back to Michelle.
Thank you. And we, just as a process, we are opening this up. There's going to be a sign up form that we ask that if you're interested that you might fill that out. We're going to be emailing that link to all of you in a post-event follow-up. So thank you, thank you, thank you. What I do want to say is that we are an active and working committee. Meaning that it's not just sort of gathering just to tell stories, but also to organize events. And like, for instance, Step Up, Step Out, or like these like Stay Connected calls, or even these kinds of virtual space gatherings. And so with that spirit, I would say that is definitely part of the possibility of becoming a committee member is hopefully the opportunity that you would like to be in working relationships with all of us. One of the things that we recognize is that we're 5 minutes until our closing, and we want to have the opportunity that you could ask us questions. And Karen, actually, could you bring forward the opportunity for people to get in touch with us?
Sure, you can email us at womenandtaiko@gmail.com.
Yes,
In the chat.
and we will put that in the chat. We really welcome you to ask us questions and to be an inquiry to just see if there are any other sort of like parameters or things that we didn't go through, which I'm sure there are. And we hope that this gave enough of a scope, maybe enough of an interest for you to be able to consider the opportunity of joining us. Do you have an event that you are currently planning? Thank you, Michelle. I'll answer that really briefly. At this point, there's nothing scheduled. We are excited to begin sort of this mobilization committee to then maybe organize public events. But we're recognizing that we are wanting to expand our committee in order to be able to promise and organize more public facing experiences. From the committee, is there any other last words? And maybe we could stop the recording right now.